your Art Sherpa, taking off my techniques in art called line and wash. This is a watercolor technique, though I'm going to show you guys, if you're doing acrylic and you don't have any watercolors, how you could paint with me today, and you're going to love it. So I'm going to break this down. I will always explain to new painters that this is sort of a no draw option. Better watercolor and have a great finished project when you download it. But I am going to show you how to draw the sheep. It's real funny because, like, on the mic is my husband, John.
Hello.
I was just telling John today that somebody had written me and was like, will you ever show us how to draw these things? And I'm like, boy, that's a quick way to tell me you haven't watched in a couple years. Because I'm usually telling you how to draw or showing you how to draw or giving you another way to get it in. But the traceable is there and it isn't cheating. So this is watercolor. I'm going to go over the materials I'm using and why. I'll go over some exchanges. I will explain to you every part of this function. This is real time. So if you're painting along with me, you can actually paint watercolor along with me live. If you've been having trouble with that, this might be something that really helps you out. Now, right now, most important thing is I am on watercolor paper, and it's a block. See how I can't make these little pages come apart? They're all glued except for one little area here that you can open everything off the pad. And this particular company is Fabriano.
So hold on just a second here.
What happened?
We're having our wake up, everything's frozen day again.
Oh man, we needed to wake it up earlier.
It likes to do this. And
right at the beginning of a show.
Yeah. Let me see what I can do about this. So give me a second and we'll recap that because I think I just may have pushed the right button that it likes. So we'll see. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't.
I love this part of the replay. We're just sitting there looking at the screen.
What you can do is you can tell them about the events and things that are going on.
Can I? Because usually you're like, don't talk.
Well,
yeah.
Tell them about like.
All right, so here's some things that you could know, but wouldn't hurt you if you didn't see it in the replay, but won't hurt you if you do. We are doing a 3-night event. There was a really good positive outpouring for the sale that we have going on in the store and for the set of 5 paints that we had on discount and how it's coming up for another beginner acrylic painting course. And it did really well, but a bunch of questions poured in, and I was like, you know what? Let's just go live 3 nights on Facebook at 7 p.m. It's a live stream on Facebook tonight, Friday night, and Saturday night. And I'm going to show you 3 cool different things with that set and other things from that line to just explain to you cool stuff you didn't know, show you techniques you've never dreamed of, just coolness all the way for fun. More Wayne's Worldy vibey, but just silliness over on Facebook. So that's coming up on 7 p.m. tonight, tomorrow night, and the next night.
Looks like we're almost back to being normal. So
almost back to being normal.
While we're almost back to being normal, I'm gonna go ahead and get our little images loaded up because I know that here in just about 2 seconds it's gonna say all good because the cache is almost done unloading.
I can't even imagine what it is, what we're doing.
Oh.
So,
what does cause that? Lindsay asked. Lindsay, it's internet craziness. I'm not exactly sure.
I think we have to just stop and take the time to troubleshoot with the internet company, I'm sure.
Now we're back ready for materials.
A lot of times when you live in a very busy neighborhood like this, you have to tune your internet. We just haven't got it turned. All right, turned.
All right.
This is a 9x12 pad. The company is Fabriano. The line is Artistico, and it is the 100% cotton. In paper, when they're trying to get the cost down, there's a lot of ways that they do it, but the one that's really problematic for watercolor sometimes is that they go from cotton to a blend, and then they get really spotty with the sizing. This is perfect sizing. This is perfect cotton. We like that for the way it holds water. All right, so I have drawn out a picture plane here and lightly sketched in my sheet. Why'd I do that here and not during the demo? Well, here's the thing. The transfer method that we use, the traceable, is incredibly critical in watercolor because you don't want to draw a line, change your mind, and erase it. Draw a line, change your mind, and erase it. It ruins the sizing. So you always want to freehand, if you can, on another piece of paper, especially if it's something super realistic like this or not a loose study, transfer it on because that protects the paper from damage. Work out your design thoughts, change your minds, all of that on less expensive paper. On this is a wet palette, but I'm going to be putting out my watercolor today. I didn't actually mean to go into materials yet. I was just talking about the paper, but I can. Okay, let's do Yellow Lake. This is my This color is sometimes called sienna yellow or Indian yellow or yellow lake, and so that's what that is. I'm gonna put out a Hansa yellow, which is just a plain yellow. I don't do CADs in the watercolors, and I want you to notice how little paint I'm putting out. This is so much paint, guys. This is paintings and paintings and paintings of paint. So much paint. So I put out my regular Hansa yellow. I put out some Indian yellow. I'm going to put out Pyro red. I'll probably put out some Quin magenta because this is so colorful. I want a bunch of colors. Now this is the red by Sennelier, but it's like a pyro red. It's unique to their company. They have honey in their watercolor, which I really, really like. Now, don't let the tubes confuse you. I'm putting out a color called Opera Pink, and I'll go back over it again. I just want you to see me do the tubes. The reason I do this stage for you guys is because one of the first things that will mess you up coming from acrylic to watercolor is that you won't know to put out the teeny tiny little bit of paint, because once the watercolor dries, even if it dries, when I add water to it, it reactivates. It doesn't ever go bad. I'm going to put out, so that was quinacridone magenta, and I'm going to put out some phthalo blue. And I will probably put out some ultramarine, and I may hit myself. I like Payne's gray instead of black. I'm going to come right here with my ultramarine blue. Here's a fun one that if you can add to, you want to. I'll tell you what you have to have and what you might want to have too when we're all done. Now I'm going to put out a little bit of my, don't really need a green. That's kind of too much of a convenience color for right now. And I'm going to get my gray, and I think that that is, with brown, enough. I'm put my gray at the top. That's Payne's gray. Put out way more than I need. Way more. Put some brown at the top. This is a pretty big palette, but not really for watercolorists. You'll see watercolors have like lots of colors, and that's just because of the nature of the pigment. So burnt umber, Payne's gray, Indian yellow, Hansa yellow. This is like a pyro red. In this particular line, it's Sennelier red, opera pink, quinacridone magenta, phthalo blue, ultramarine blue, pyro orange. I'm going to put out a little more pyro orange. You'll notice I don't have any white, and that is because the paper is the white. Now I don't have to worry about this drying or anything. And I've got my little 3 cups of water right here. And the other important thing, if you're brand new to watercolor, that you might not know is that I have a paper towel right here. So those are the things that I have right there. And let's quick do in step 1. Let's talk about how to draw the sheep. I'm going to use my multimedia pad. Multimedia pads are wonderful if you're an artist who works in like more than one thing. Or even if you just run acrylic, you can use it as a test pad. I really, really like these.
Nice.
So I'm going to come here and I'm going to draw my little sheeples again. Now, the first thing conceptually when we're drawing something is how we think. And I'm going to do this much darker. When you draw, we're going to do the practice. How light do we draw when we're drawing on watercolor paper? Right, well, that would be too dark, too dark, too dark, too dark, too dark, too dark, still 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 too dark. Starting. In this range here is how light it is, where you guys can barely see it. It's always good to practice pressure to no pressure with your pencil. Can you go from its darkest color to its lightest gray, darkest gray to lightest gray in pressure? So once I have that done, what I kind of look at in a sketch is a lot of times the spacing. And one of the first things that I notice about this sheep is this coquettish little butt. By the way, you guys have been asking about where to get animal reference pictures. I can't share them on here because of the terms of service of the website, but Paint My Photo has an infinite number of animal pictures for artists, and you retain the copyright. So if you want the reference, you can find these at Paint My Photo, different references. So I'm going to make a little ball there, and that kind of opens up the size there. And then I'm going to come and make sort of a second little ball here, and that will talk about the little sheep, because this is really, if you think about it, and you're going to laugh in a second, but a sheep body is sort of a cone, right? It's just sort of a little tube. It's just, we're just making tubes, right? So this is a little coquettish tube. You know, a little flirty tube. And so once I have that in, then I can kind of like scale in where do I think the head attaches, right, to this body? Where am I going to attach the head? positioning, and then overall like space that it takes up. So you can see already that in my sketching style, right, the way that I sketch things in, doing this on my watercolor paper would not be my favorite. Let me put my glasses on so I see everything real well when I'm doing it. I'm telling you right now, seeing is the best way to deal with drawing. And come here. Now, the face is kind of this sort of shape in here, so I work that out, and then I will start to pay attention to details. Like I'll notice the nose has this little bit of a pull off, and then I've got a joint there for the eye. And push this down and make this eye. This is a very little sassy eye. I don't know how to explain it. Sassy eye, right? And so I have this wonderful sort of shape, and then I know I've got a little leg here and another little leg here, and then there's this sort of flirty little leg, and then another little flirty little leg. So I'm kind of weird with my little, flirting on my legs. Once I have that in, I can start to think about where that tail would go, which is right here, and I know my ears are going to be off here. I did not. Can you ask it for me while I'm staring down drawing?
Sure.
And then,
Amy.
Oh, sorry. And before you ask, and then once you have the sketch in, then I start to loosely put in that little shape around the body, the little fur shapes, and I will draw in my little legs with knees and hocks. Okay, ask question.
Amy said, should one contact the company if the watercolor paint does not dry and stays sticky? I would say, in general, yes.
No.
Yeah, well, I mean, like if you ask questions.
It's not going to dry the way Amy thinks. Like sometimes the Aquarelle, the tube paint, if you bought our brand, if you bought one with honey in it,
that's what I mean.
You don't need to call the company.
Right.
It's supposed to be sticky.
Each paint could have different things.
No, it's supposed to be.
Oh, I know. But I mean,
but if it's not, if it's not a honey paint, then yes,
right.
Call the company. But if it is honey paint, you can still call the company. They love to hear from you.
Right.
But it is an aspect of that paint to not be as chalky, because instead of they use honey in the binder.
Right. So it won't hurt you to call the company. So you can always call the company. That's kind of what I was getting at. Is that always feel like that. But some paints will stay sticky. Some paints won't. It's a nature of the binders and the elements that they use in it. And throughout time, different artists have preferred different ways that the paint is made. So sometimes some artists like the paint that's more sticky, and some artists don't.
We should probably get back to teaching the drawing.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Back to that.
I realize I've just been drawing. So I'm going to use what's called a kneadable eraser, and I'm going to probably erase this again because I think we talked over the entire lesson here of the drawing, and I want to just make sure that we have that in. So let me get back into this. I want to come in through the chest, and then along the belly, I'm going to bring this down here. Now there's a little hock here, and so I can bring that little fur in. This is where the line will start to be more determined, and you want to draw the thickening of the hock coming up. It's like the muscles come into here, that little shape is there, and then you can either line this leg like right up to it or next to it. And then the little tail will go down here, and we're going to bring this here. Coming around here. So you can see I'm using line to even describe. If you look at this line, look how I'm using line to even describe the fur. Now, but remember, how light are we drawing this? It's light, so light you can barely see it, right? Because you don't want, these dark lines. Now, when I finish that, then to make the traceable, I would ink over, and I'll show you just a little bit, and then we're going to ink our, let's find a fine tip one. Here's a good one. This is a fine tip Faber-Castell Artist Pitt pen. I love these. They're waterproof. They do everything. Then with the pen, then you can kind of come in and capture the lines that will help you with the traceable. All right, and so you can see this here. So I just go right over it. Now, when I want to transfer this on, I use the transfer method. I have a whole video about how to do that, but that's how you create it. You save that piece of paper. That way, anytime you want to put this sheep in a painting, you can put the sheep in a painting. And then if you want to like make cards or repeat it or try it with different colors to see how it looks, like maybe like you think this is a cute idea, but you wish it was a spring sheep and it was like a like 4, right? So the thing is that the traceable, this is art process. And I like sharing watercolor with you guys because it demonstrates more than anything how this is art process. And I'm sorry I got like confused there for a second. All right, so going on here, we are going to continue on. So I've got my line drawing on here, and this gives you a sense, how light do I want it? And I have a choice here. I can ink now, right? Drawing all my little lines that I want to have on the painting, or ink at the end and then resolve it. Now, in this particular case, I'm going to ink at the end. If you have waterproof ink, you can ink anytime because once it's dry, you can wash right over it. It's why it's line and wash. But we're washing over the pencil lines, and then we're going to come back in and ink in some lines. So we're having a bit of fun here with how we're playing with it. Now, actually, no, for you guys to see it, I will ink him in because I think you won't be able to see the painting. And if I ink him in now, for lesson purposes, I'm going to do it now. But I can do that because my pen is waterproof. If you don't know if your pen is waterproof, most Bic pens are. A lot of Sharpies are. But if you're not sure, you can always test it on the side paper or ink at the end. I'm going to ink now. All right, let's come in here. And here's when my line matters. Every line I make now has weight to the image. All right, this is a fine Faber-Castell 199 Pitt pen, right? Again, lots and lots of good pens. I just really, really love these. They're just one I like. I'm going to barely ink there. I don't ink too much. I'll come in and be a little sketchy here. On the ear, I will ink in a shadow. And you'll notice that I did little lines that went next to each other. Again, Bic pens work with this shockingly well. All right. There you go. So now we're really starting to see the character of the face. I don't have too much on the line down here. Now I'm going to really sort of be more playful with my line right now. More playful with it. And I may even kind of bring some up into the little sheepers here to kind of create a ruff. See how I'm creating a little ruff? Now, another thing you may consider doing, and I'll show you to be a good example, is I rest my hand on my paper. And that can drag graphite all over the place, super annoyingly. And so sometimes putting down a paper towel can be really helpful. You can see that these lines are just silly and playful and fun. And again, I'm just tracing over it. Just tracing over it. I think I've tucked my other little leg in here this time. That's fine. I don't mind. Now right here, we definitely want the little belly to show, and then I'll bring a little fluff up and I'll wiggle my little pen there and it creates those little lines. I'm going to be able to just wash over this. You guys made me ink little octopus from Finding Nemo. Oh, I love that. All right, and keep coming here. All right, so once that's in, you know, you can come in and you can do things like maybe in areas like between the legs, you can make little rough lines. See how these lines are adventurous and and playful and scribbly. I think one of the great shames when we take away loving drawing for young people, because when people are young and they try to learn how to draw and then they get criticized and then they don't want to. But I think the great thing that we take away from people is just the sheer joy that doodling is. Doodling is joyful. This is relaxing. This is healing, right? And you can see I'm just going over the paper and I'm just like adding where the shadow will be, and that way that there's kind of maybe less of one there. Now on this background hill, I may come in with my little pen and kind of sketch that lightly back there. And there, and that just sets a little bit of background. Now I'll bring some line in there. That little line there does quite a lot. Now, one thing that can happen is that sometimes you want to do thick and thin lines, like for trees or things. And so I can take a brush nib of this particular pen, come up to the side, and draw up some of the dark and more prominent sticks that could be happening over here. And I'll bring those up. It doesn't have to be every one, and I can do some of them with both my pen that I used on my sheep here and then also with the brush. Sometimes being a little sketchy is a good idea. Now I'm going to take my line off my picture plane, even though I know I'm framing at this line, and that's for continuity. Patty, thank you so much. And Shay Joe, thank you so much. You guys are really nice. Thank you. Now here's a fun trick. So one of the things that can be really challenging is catching all the small branches. And when you combine the size of nibs, what you're going to see is that I have these thick branches, but then I can draw lots of little sketchy little twigs, which will help us feel like this area has some dried flora and fauna. And again, I haven't even got my watercolor involved yet. I do think it's good to carry some of this stuff around, so I'm going to make a little sketch there. The reason I do this, even though I might come back through with brush, is so that there's a story that is through the whole thing. Just wiggling it up. And you can see just making little squiggles and all of that. Now I'm going to put out a little acrylic, but this is just for my acrylic artists, so that when I do teach it, so we're going to know that up here I got the little acrylic for my acrylic artist, and I may put out white later, but I don't think I'm going to need any white for this particular piece. Okay, let's sip coffee, look overhead, and see what we think of our line. Sorry I was a little scattered today. My brain has just fallen out of its like right out of the bucket.
That's okay. I got my coffee. I'm feeling a little better.
Were you feeling a little? Oh, because you're outside so cold. When you get a chance.
I wasn't so cold.
No?
No,
okay.
That was okay.
Well, I'm glad you feel better.
Yeah.
I did not know you were not feeling well. I'm so sorry. All right. I am going to go ahead and do this wash.
Okay.
Up here, in the sky, I'm gonna use my round brush. This is a number 14 Raphael Soft Aqua, and this is where we're gonna test if I was correct about my ink being waterproof. But up here, I just want to show you something real quick. So in watercolor, I'm going to get my paper wet, pre-wet it. And then I'm going to come here and I'm going to grab some of my red. I'm going to come to the edge, and you're going to notice this sort of blooming and flow. And see how little paint is on my brush? I'm not thick painting it. John, we're up here.
I'm sorry. I was over here checking out. Let me see if I can get up there. I thought you were talking about something else. There you go.
All right. So I will demo that again. Let me go.
Yeah, let me actually get. I didn't realize you were over there on that part.
Let me wet out another here. I'm going to wet out another here. I'm so sorry, guys. Today it's just been
Whoa, whoa, I don't want to do that much. But I do want to
All
zoom in.
right. So I'm just getting water. It's like what I like to call a clear painting. Thank you, Tasha. I'm so
There we go.
super glad that you joined Custom Emojis. So I'm going to get back into my, this is the Senelli red, the bright red. And I'm going to come right here. And you're going to see that where I touch that brush, that pigment goes everywhere. Now I'm above my picture plane, so I can do all of this testing all around anything. Now, this just really diffuses and goes out, and it binds into the paper. So does acrylic. I will bind it out. I'm going to go ahead and just touch them out. And you see it's doing the same thing? That was the acrylic. But here it's the same. Different color, I mean. But it's the same in how it diffuses. Maybe a little more actively. It will lift. It will do a lot of the techniques. That is some because my sizing is really good, the surface paper. But it's also some because of the nature how all this works. Now, here's what you need to know. If you're painting with acrylic and there's a technique where there's a lot of lifting, that's going to be harder for you because your paint is very staining. If you're painting with acrylic and your paint dries, you won't be able to lift it back up the way I can for watercolor. Right. So it's where the watercolor is able to activate again, and it's where the acrylic becomes a surface that you can't get any more pigment into because the plastic literally starts sealing the paper.
And the black pen is permanent.
The black pen is super permanent. And again, here's my recommendation. There's lots of good ones. And I've done Sharpie. I think I have a Sharpie here. I can test a Sharpie for you. I'm pretty sure Sharpie is. Because I feel like I've done Sharpie before. I have to do it with the kids. Because they can't do, honestly, I don't think y'all love light pencil, dark pencil either, but they can't. See, I'm right over the top of it, and I just put it down. So Sharpie is waterproof. Big pens are waterproof. Lots of things are waterproof. Just put them to the side, let them dry, and if you can go like that, then they're waterproof. Now, speaking of our sky, let's throw up our step for our sky. I'm going to come here, and we're going to paint everything above what we're going to say is our distant farm hills. We're going to paint it with water. You're like, well, that seems weird. Okay. And again, I'm using a number 14 Raphael Soft Aqua. It's just a round brush. I give these at my retreats. Just is a crazy thing. It's one of the best engineered brushes on the planet, and I love them very much. And it is amazing for watercolor, and it doesn't use any squirrel or Kolinsky sable, and yet it mimics it beautifully. Now, I will paint very carefully around my sheet. Some challenges I'm having that you may or may not have is I'm on a slightly angled table, which means my water is going to want to run down the page.
Gravity. And
collect wherever I stopped painting it. So I do have to remember to wet well enough up at the top. And then weirdly, sometimes I will pick up down at the bottom, and that's how I control that. Now this is a multicolored little background, right? So let's get our bright yellow, right? Our Hansa yellow. And we're going to come right here behind the little trees and go over them. And just in the corner. And I do kind of brush it up, but you'll notice also I leave whole areas unpainted. I'm going to go ahead and get some of my Indian yellow or yellow lake, depending on what you have. And you can see it's definitely much warmer. And I'm just letting the paint flow around the paper. And it's doing that because the paper is wet.
Huh.
If I want to stop maybe it traveling somewhere, I can come lift back up with a paper towel. And I'm going to get into blue. I'm going to get into my phthalo blue real quick. You can see I'm wetting it out. But I'm not taking all of that with me. I'm just wetting it out.
Gotcha.
Now, okay, you're about to ask something?
So this is just similar as what you were demonstrating earlier, where you got it wet, and then that allows the water to flow.
Exactly.
The pigment to flow around.
Now, I will pick up water here. Again, I'm on a tip, so I have to control my water just a little bit. And I find with skies like this, sometimes it's nice to... This is me just picking up the paint as it's wanting to run. Now I can go ahead and get into my magenta a little bit. Well, that was very strong and wonderful. I might bring that down. Huh. Just had fun there for a second. I'll bring that up into the sky. I'll get into my ultramarine blue. Coming in this upper corner. So this sky comes in pretty quick, doesn't it? Now I'm going to get a little bit of my red. Now let's add some orange into that. I feel like that's super dark. So what I do is I come back and I blend it in and I lighten it up with my brush. Now it's going to do color shift just like my acrylic paint, except that my acrylic paint, it tends to dry darker and watercolor will dry lighter. I'm just adding little bits of sky out here and just being kind of playful. Maybe a little more orange over here. And my big trick will be to just stop soon enough. Just stop soon enough. So I'm going to let that have a rest there for a second and rinse my brush out and take a sip of my coffee. Oh, I definitely need to heat up.
You need to heat up?
And if there's any questions I should take, do you know what artistic means?
Yeah,
when my mom ended up saying it came out artistic. Generally, I mean, like, it's hard to know what your mom specifically means about, I don't mean to hold it there like a crazy person. What your mom means by the word artistic, because that's her own feeling about that. But generally what I found, Lindsay, is when people say your artwork looks artistic, what they're saying is that if they feel it was expressive and creative and it shows a type of imaginative freedom that they have associated with artisticness. Oftentimes it is something that might relate to that you were colorful or you were loose with it, or I mean, it's like a bunch of things, but just generally means that some version of what you did just really struck that person as you being artful. Oh, Debbie Evans, thank you so much. I saw Patty and Shay. Yeah, that was fantastic. And Tasha, thank you so much. And everyone is wishing you a happy belated birthday, John. Now, one of the reasons I'm talking like a villain to you, and one of the things you don't necessarily see on recorded watercolors always, is the drying time. Why am I just letting it dry? Well, as it's drying here, you will notice that it continues to soften and develop and change and be a little bit different. And I find that there's a magic in watercolor where allowing it to have a second to work itself out is very useful to us as artists to just let it rest. Every sky I paint this, I'm going to come and put my neck layer in, but every sky when you come in and you paint like this, each one will be a little different from the next. Watercolor is definitely not a great medium if you like carbon copies. I would say pencil is a good medium for that, or ink. But stuff happens here, and so you've got to be really ready for stuff to happen on your paper. Now I'm going to rinse out my brush. And rinse. And I'm going to come here, and I'm going to kind of maybe think about this a little bit, and I'm going to get into my Indian yellow, my yellow lake. And if you'll notice, I'm not pre-wetting the water. I'm going to come up mid-tree and kind of bring it down. Now, I will load a drip coming off here, but I have a weird little trick with drips. I'm going to tell my drip where to go. I'm going to paint my drip down. I do this because I find that it can give me a lot of anxiety to try to control. I'm going to get some red here and maybe some orange again. Painting over here, grabbing a little warmed up orange. And let's let that travel down through there. Now I can rinse out vigorously. I'll get a little bit of just a little, and I can kind of come along here, and maybe that's a bit more washed, and you'll notice that that's very, very light. Now I may have to demonstrate sometimes using a hairdryer here to accelerate drying, but at home where you can just take a second and let something dry, you'll be glad you did. Now I'm going to come touch over here, and there's two stages of dry in watercolor. There's dry, dry, and there is cool dry, not really dry. It's like it's not wet to your touch, but if you put your wrist against it, it'll be cool. It's what it is the cotton paper holds a lot of the water, and it has not completely bone dried out. As it dries, the block will restretch it flat and make it a perfect surface. But right now, there's some fun painting that you can do, some fun, interesting things that you can have going on. Now I'm going to take a little bit of my brown here. And I'm going to come along my little back line here, which is not dry dry, it's cool dry. So this will still weirdly soften. It won't sit on the surface the way it will when we're just making marks on bone dry paper. I'm going to make a little sort of darkness over here. Hello, darkness, my old friend. There you go. That's fine.
My flashlight here will be your end.
Just a little bit along there. Your flashlight will be my what? Is what? I don't.
The darkness. My flashlight here will be your end.
Well, yeah. Yeah, we can do that. Yeah. I'm going to come here and grab a little bit of my blue. And you guys know I love me some ultramarine blue, right? With some brown to create grays. You've met me. You know it. I'm going to get a little bit of this grayed blue right there, which is my ultramarine and my burnt umber here. I'm going to bring a little shadow down. Kind of come along here. Maybe touch a few little places out here with this kind of gray blue color. I can get into more blue with my phthalo, and you can see when I work that in there, that's really quite lovely in a winter sense. If I offload with a little water and I do what's called a wash, and I can come in and pick up a little bit of color, which I always find delightful. Spicy Mom says, thank you for watercolor tutorials again. Joy from Ontario. How you doing, Joy? I have one coming up. You're gonna just, it's just joy for joy. It's just joy for joy. All right, let's grab a little bit of our ultramarine blue here. And this time I might get a little Payne's Gray involved with it. I'm going to imply that there's a bit of a shadow kind of coming around into our legs, right? Where we have just a little bit of deeper, darker shadow. And maybe put a little there. Add a little bit up there. And then can come into my ultramarine. And you can see that it's just, if I even go into my phthalo, right, to get some different blues, I will do some sketching with my brush, almost like it's a pencil, making little light snow marks in the distance. That's how we're painting the snow, is we're just painting the little bits of color that one might see there. And come under that. But I don't go onto my sheep yet. No, I don't. Now let's grab a little more of the phthalo. And I'm going to follow along under here. And I'm going to pull it up into here. And then I'm going to grab my water heavily. And I'm going to remember we paint our drips. We're going to paint our drips. We may get some drips, but we want to paint our drips if we can. Bring one down, just using the toe of the brush. You don't really need 3 or 4 brushes oftentimes with watercolor. Put a little more color than I meant. Okay, let's call that a step. Now I'm going to get a little of my phthalo blue here, and it's had ultramarine in it. And you can see, man, I have barely touched the paint. I'm just like, it's practically picking up water. I'm not going to pre-wet the face because I need control of where this goes. I will not go past that little stripe line there. I want you to leave a little white between that black line and there. But you can put a little color on that far eye. Come across. We're not going to go up past there because we've got to have a little bit of light on the forehead. I don't want to at all bring any pigment to the far side. Now I'm going to get my brush wet and kind of wipe it off and blend that in. Brush wet again. See how that's sort of blended and modeled. Now I can get into my gray here while this is all still damp and do some really fun and playful work, but it's delicate work still. Bring a little line down from the eye. Little shading around that ear. Maybe a little brown. Right up there. Isn't that lovely? Just a lot of fun. I'll bring a little brown right here. Be on the inside of the ear a bit. But I can come over the top with just a smidge of blue, and it's just amazing. It just comes in. Now I'm going to rinse out. I'm going to come down to the little bottom here. Might pre-wet this just a bit. Coming down into the forefront. I'll be careful around my little fur. Come up there. And I think I'll add some to the back. Now I'm going to get a little of my yellow. Grab some orange. That was a little stronger than I expected in the moment, but I don't mind. When I have that happen, when it's stronger than I expect, I rinse out, get clean water, dry my brush off, and just hoover that sucker up. And what will happen is just beauty and joy. It's like, I think what happens with people in watercolor, let's take a little bit of our brown over to our yellow. What happens for a lot of people with watercolor is that once they get around that first stress of I put a mark down and it's done, which seems to be, genuinely intense for people. I'm adding a little yellow and red to my mix and coming down to the low part of the just playing through there. Less is more. Now I'm going to come to my back. And this one I'm going to grab some of this yellow, and it has some brown in it. These marks I may initially start out making on dry paper. The reason being is that controls it. Now, and get some just yellow. Take some yellow and red. Some bright color there. It's just fun. Rinse out. All right. Now coming over to the far side and around the rest of him, I'm going to be more in blues. In this particular case, I'll start out in my turquoise range. And I will go ahead and, instead of pre-wet, I will loosely paint here so that we get some of that control and spontaneous mixing. Just a little bit there, right? And then I might grab some of my ultramarine and come on this side. And come around that far side to create shading. Now I might want to grab a little bit of my quinacridone and my ultramarine blue and come underneath. Maybe a little more ultramarine blue. So quinacridone and ultramarine blue make purple just the same in watercolor as it does in acrylic. And grab a little bit of my red. And see, it's going to continue to soften and soften and soften and soften. I'm going to rinse out. And I'm also going to grab a little bit of my phthalo blue. Bring that around kind of under the ear. And, you know, paint that a little bit through there. I don't want to lose the lightness on my shoulder, so I have to pick that up if it gets up into that, because that's what really gives that a shape. Now I might want to grab a little bit of this orange here and just kind of think about how it might talk about that hill. I can take a little bit of my yellow and my phthalo blue and even kind of get some green going there. So you can see that this is still having a dry on the drips, and it's still having a dry in some of the other places. And grab a little more gray. And I haven't even rinsed my brush here for a second. I'm just going to come above there and just make sure that there's a shading there. Maybe into the ear, because tricksy like that. And then down at the little face. It's colorful sheep, as what it is colorful sheep. Now the next part, I do want it to be dry. I'm going to take advantage of gravity and wind flow and just sort of blow my drips down with my hairdryer.
Yeah.
If you have the luxury of just letting it dry, let it dry.
This shouldn't take too much. We're just going to let it kind of dry for a second. I imagine that it'll, yeah, like you said, if you can let it dry on your own, I think that it'll naturally it will do better because it can rest and sort of flow down in there. So I'm not sure exactly how long we'll need to do that. So there we go.
This I want to be dry because anything less can be hard on my pen. I'm going to get
step now, yeah?
back. Yeah, I'm going to get back into my fine. And back here, I'm going to make some marks that could be trees or whatever has just eked its way through a rough winter. The hardest part, I think, about this will be just learning to trust your marks. See, everything I do here with my pen is just a mark. And a lot of what we learn as artists is how to make better marks that have, you know, good energy, or like, see, these are very energetic marks. The energy that I use to draw them, you know, also conveys the shape of them. I'll bring some little sketchy sketches through here. You can see that I use scribbling a lot as a way of conveying that. Now, once I have that down, I can also come to the back of the legs. I'm going to make a little extra shading here.
Wow, it's all coming together here.
I'm going to bring into that little hawk and then maybe behind the leg. And it's okay. Take this time to sketch in some personality on your little sheep. Now that the color's here, because there's these stages, right? Like there's the stage where I'm going to go ahead and make that very dark. There's the stage where we have the idea of where we're going, and then there's the stage where the paint has started to dry and we see where we've gone. And it's okay to, in that moment, come in and say, you know what I need is a little line right here and a little line right there. And Lindsay asked earlier, what does it mean when someone says, it's artistic? I think this would be definitely one of those paintings that somebody might look at and go, that's very artistic. Right? Because I'm not like being the Audubon Society. I'm not, rendering things scientifically accurately. I'm like whimsically playing. So for me, that's very chill. All right, I'm going to grab a little bit of my gray over. Wet it out, and haven't changed brushes. Sometimes I do that. I have a lot of brushes over here in my brush bucket for my watercolors, but sometimes I do do that so that you guys don't get too hard on yourselves about having every brush, because it's not too necessary. I'm just going to come in and very carefully sketch in the gray that is the legs at first, coming down. It's my first layer of it. Get a little gray and brown, more concentrated on my brush, and I'm going to come to the back of the leg again, underneath. Now I might take a little more gray. Up through a couple places, right? And that's okay. It's okay to have gray through a few places. Super okay. A little bit here and there. And then the other thing I can do is I can come in and get my brown and go into my oranges, right? So that's my yellow and my red and a little brown. Get some nice dead grass, and also with my brush make lines and marks. See how we can do? So there's so many ways that we do make lines and marks. Lines and marks, lines and marks. Oh my, oh my, oh my. There's maybe more of a mark than I wanted. Little brushes, little twigs that come out into the countryside. And I think at some point, sometimes one of the hard parts is trying to decide when we're done. Right? Because you'll be painting along and you're like, oh,
you
a
can
little
just
splash
keep
of
adding
color
little
here.
bits here and there.
Yeah, I could put a little red color there, and I'm glad for it, and maybe touch there. I just go and go and go. And that's the thing. Now, I can sign here, and I will tend to sign. If I use ink, especially on line and wash, I will sign with my pen. I will use, not the brush, I will use my fine liner. And that's just because the brush's tip wears out super soon. So I tend to protect it. So I'll sign it there. Now, in framing, you just have a mat. You would take this whole sheet out once it's dry, and then you would just frame it under glass. You do a couple mats, cardboard mats, and then glass, 9x12 outer glass or whatever size you want to, because it's on the inside. And since it's square, you can make it any size to go in any frame you want, big or small. I think that's, Helen Blankley, thank you so much.
Can I say something that I saw interesting if you're wanting to frame? I was at the Dollar Tree, and they have a whole new line of 8x10 frames that are $1.25 that have a nice thick border that look like wood and have little gold trim. I was almost picked some up. I'm regretting not grabbing some so I could just even show them to you. But a cheap way to frame it, it was $1.25 for a frame that came with plastic glass, and you just throw it right in there easy.
That is incredible. Well, listen, guys, I hope you like today's little deviation into watercolor. Tonight, 7, we have, John had to totally guide me through promoting. Tonight at 7, I have a really fun event happening on Facebook. I've got a 3-night event happening on Facebook. I'm trying to get us ready for the beginner acrylic course, which is starting next Tuesday. And you don't have to have materials yet, but we're getting to that place. And so I'm doing stuff with it, but also because I have some fun stuff I want to show you, some fun stuff I want to teach you, and some fun stuff I haven't done anywhere before. And it's on Facebook Live at 7 p.m. You just go by my page and it'll be streaming there. And then those videos will be available on the website to watch later. So you can. So if you want to see that, I love the difference between my first sheet and my second sheet. But just
Are you going to spray seal this?
No.
No.
But there are varnishes now for watercolor. So
Okay.
Traditionally in watercolor, how we would protect it is put it behind glass. We allow it to dry, and then we put it behind glass, and that glass can have UV protection. A bunch of varnishes have just been fairly recently produced and tested, and they are very, very much liked. I think Golden and Sennelier make safe ones that I've heard other artists talk about, and I haven't used all of them that are out there, but those two I've used, and they're great. I'm sure when Holbein makes it, it will be safe. I'm sure when PBO makes it, but I haven't tried those. I have done the Sennelier, and I have done the Golden, and I think they're both fantastic. They're products for watercolor. So yes, there is, and you should use it if you like it, and enjoy your sheeples. The Melody Cried says, love the colors. I love the colors too. Can you do this with gouache, says Elizabeth, huh?
I was about to ask that one.
Yeah. Do I love the colors for specifically from a paint company or just for this painting? Because I love the colors for this painting, but I also have opinions on paint companies. Karen Horak is calling from South Africa. Thank you for the tutorial tonight. Thank you for your video tutorials. I'm learning a lot.
Yeah.
And Spicy Mom says Dorland's wax works. Yes, Dorland's wax works, but more importantly than that, for watercolor, it works on acrylic to keep the pages from sticking together. If you're an art journaler. So don't see it. Can I do it with gouache? Yes, you can do this with gouache. Line and wash with gouache is just done a little bit differently because it's opaque. It's not transparent. So you would be putting down the paint differently, and you might do your lining after the gouache is put down because that would sit on top of. You can sometimes, though, do it first, like in illumination. Like you could illuminate this, and you can water down gouache and wet wash out with it. I find that it's nice to layer up. Can be really, really good. And so you can do this with acrylic, you can do this with gouache, you can do this with watercolors, you probably do this with pencils, all kinds of things. And I'm going to keep trying to show you guys some interesting new stuff. We'll do different, interesting, fun lessons besides acrylic on occasion, sometimes for a good time. But Saturday is an acrylic lesson, and the 3-night live is a lesson, and the Zoom coming up is a lesson.
Yeah.
That's all acrylic. So acrylic for days. But sometimes oil pastel or watercolor or drawing or ink or something else. And I hope you like this little sheepy. Yeah. It's the 2024 sheep. He's looking back at 2023 saying, I'm over you. I'm over you. I'm moving on. I'm going. The last few years, no. He said, no more. 2024 is going to be amazing. Sorry.
No, I think that's exactly where we're going.
Okay. Guys, thank you. Thank John for he's got so many things on his plate right now, and he's just going. He's put up with so much. So everybody give John a hand.
Thank you, Carol.
Just had a birthday. Thank you so much, Carol T. If the mods can drop a link to my Facebook page, it's the Art Sherpa page. And also, if you're here on YouTube, if you go to the community tab, I posted about it, and I direct link too.
Yeah.
So you can find it from there, and you can just go, if you just search Facebook, the Art Sherpa, the page. So there's me. And it's my face, and then the cartoon face, that's my page. You see my face, my real face, it's me. That's my verified account, so I can get help from Facebook. And then, because I need some sometimes. Carol T, I so appreciate that. But the one with the cartoon and the pink hair, that's the page. And the mods will share a link, I'm sure. And there's one on the community tab. And it'll be 7 p.m. Eastern, which is great for our Australian friends who never get to watch, but finally get to maybe see a show. And I think it's going to be good. We're going to have a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So I'll see you again tonight at 7 on Facebook. See you there. I know if you didn't know that, you should follow my Facebook page. Be good to yourselves. Be good to each other. And I want to see you at an easel really soon. Bye-bye.